Hello and welcome to this, the first of ITWeb TV's interviews, broadcast first at our 2023 Security Summit. So grab yourself a coffee, something to snack on, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. Today, we're chatting to Nithen Naidoo, CEO and founder of Snode. It's a South African cybersecurity company that's gone global. We're going to discuss a few things from Snode's history and business to the international world of cyber espionage. So let's get started. Nithen, hello, how are you doing today?
Hi, Adrian. I'm really well. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. So I guess I have to kind of explain to our attendees that you're not able to join us today live at the event, unfortunately. You're joining us from Vietnam. Is that a holiday? Is it a work? Is that where you're based now? Tell us a little bit about why you're in Nam.
Yeah, so, we're in the fortunate position. Snode has, over the years, picked up a lot of clients cross-border. We find ourselves in Southeast Asia a lot. We've got a huge client base in the Philippines, and we're now kicking off operations in Vietnam. But we still, our largest base is still our African base. Second being Australia and Southeast Asia.
Okay, cool. So we'll delve into that a little bit later on, but let's take a step back. Tell me about your career background. Tell me about Nithen. Where did you cut your teeth? And where did the idea from Snode come from? How did this all kind of come about?
All right. So my background is penetration testing. So, banks, governments would hire us to gain unauthorized access to their networks. And over the years, what we found is that was incredibly easy. It made me realize we weren't helping the client solve the problem. If every year I come back and I do a penetration test, and I can gain access to the networks and to your sensitive data assets, it made me ask myself the question, are we really solving the problem? And that led me down the road or the path to understanding how we chose to solve the problem. So at the time, this would have been about 2011, what I realized is a lot of our detection systems still use signature-based detection. And that was fine in the 80s and the 90s where, hackers were predominantly kids in their bedrooms, etc. You weren't dealing with organized crime. You weren't dealing with nation-state attackers who are as resourceful as they are today. And that's why attacks are so prevalent. But it's also about the diversity and the advancement of the attacker. And then I looked at our detection capabilities and, we kind of still approach detection in the same way with signature-based detection. And it's just not plausible in today's day and age to think that you're going to stop an attacker, by developing signatures for every type of malware, that exists on the planet today. So a better form of detection was required. This led us down a research path where we looked at everything from artificial intelligence to machine learning to mathematics, specifically Bayesian mathematics. And we found a detection system that worked for us incredibly well. And initially, we gave it to clients within the industrial sector, specifically in the mining sector. And from there, the business just self-propelled and took a life of its own. Very quickly, from becoming a consulting service of, where we were analyzing traffic, we realized we had accidentally built a product. Okay. And that's a story of the birth of Snode.
Okay, cool. So tell us a bit about Snode itself. Tell us about the business model, the business philosophy. How have you grown from this kind of accidental consultancy into a business that you are today? I think I've seen somewhere that you're on 6 continents. You're presenting live today from Southeast Asia. How have you gone from being in South Africa to kind of conquering the world?
Yeah, it's quite an interesting story. So we started off actually in my mom's house, like all good startups tend to do. And today we monitor 5 million devices around the world, everything from agri-tech in the Philippines to mines in South America. And there's only so many hours in the day. And the attackers never sleep. Security is a 24/7 job. So the question was, how do we take what we do and the value we add as human beings And how do we scale that? How do we give that to 100 companies, if not 1,000 companies, or maybe the entire globe at scale, in real time, and all time, for all time, so 24/7. And this is where Snode came into its own. So on top of the ability to detect attacks that were like previously undetected, as we mentioned before, the other area where we did a lot of learning and research and innovation is automatic response. So we call it traditionally active defense, and we've designed systems that essentially respond to threats in real time. The responding to an attack today, 5 minutes after the event occurred, is already too late. And the complexity and the diversity of the environments that we need to protect today, with the emergence of IoT, wearables, bring your own device, multi-cloud, software as a service, to think that you can have a team of human beings responding to the array of attacks that we experience on a daily basis. It's just cognitive overload in terms of data, and it's just not efficient, to do it in terms of human response. So we strongly believe in security automation. So this very next feature we chased straight after we had superior threat detection and vulnerability detection was automatic response. And today we use automated response systems in the cloud, in OT environments, in IT environments, covering all diverse landscapes, for mining, industrial, agriculture, power grids, critical national infrastructure, all those kinds of environments. Yeah.
Okay. And then the business itself, I mean, you said it was kind of a small startup in your mum's, I want to put words in your mouth and say in your mum's garage, mum's basement. Those are usually the kind of places that they talk about with startups. But like, how big is the company now? How has it grown? What challenges have you faced in terms of, because I think people look at businesses and they look at successful entrepreneurs and they think, oh, they've got this lifestyle or and it's just come easy to them. But I think the reality is it's very hard to build a business. There's a lot of unseen kind of work and blood, sweat and tears that goes into building a business. Mm-hmm. So tell me a bit of that background of the actual kind of from, founding the business, growing it. What kind of challenges have you faced?
So I think the biggest challenge is an interesting one. I think as Africans, and not just South Africans, we sometimes discount ourselves and our own capabilities. Even though we've got great thought leadership and we've got a great history and innovation in specifically in the defense arena, I think the biggest battle that we had to face was to convince our own audience that we were capable of building world-beating technology that would not just be embraced locally and across the continent, that would be embraced globally as a technology of choice that came from our shores. And I think it's not the nicest thing to say, but we had to achieve a lot of success cross-border before we were given the opportunity to show what we can do here locally. And almost as early as this morning, I had a local state client asking us, how do I know I can trust a South African solution, to look after me? And in the world we live in, a lot of countries are asking, how do I know if I can trust a cross-border solution? You see what's happening with TikTok, the US banning Kaspersky and other Russian products and Chinese products from the US, and the US and the Russians performing much of the same, even across neutral countries. Some of the reasons why Snode is so successful cross-border is because a lot of African countries want to adopt more African technology. And I find at home, it's ironic that we have the inverse. So that was the biggest problem that we had to face. And I think if there's ever like only one challenge or problem I solve, it's to help us perform that paradigm shift as South African thought leaders, providers, and just an information security community, to propel us onto a global stage and to be the catalyst and to assist, not just myself, but like many other companies. We have great companies in South Africa, but to take some of these brands, to take some of these people, and to take some of our thinking and put it onto a global stage where, may I add, it's sorely needed.
Sure. Okay, cool. I mean, you've obviously kind of worked across, and we've discussed, or you've mentioned the fact that South Africa almost kind of resisted adopting your solutions because it wasn't like there's this lack of maybe trust of competency of local solutions. But what have been the big differences when you've kind of gone out beyond maybe Africa or into Africa, but also into Southeast Asia, into the other continents? What have been the differences in those different markets? Like, what have you sensed maybe in East Asia that we wouldn't get here? Yeah, how have you seen those markets differ?
That's an excellent question. So in Southeast Asia, like I'm in Vietnam at the moment, it's quite the opposite, right? Whether you're in Vietnam or Nigeria, I've been posed with this comment. I love what you have, but I need to see if I can find a local provider, or if someone locally is doing something along the same lines. So I think a big part of the conversation here is, do we have local capabilities? Do I have local service providers or local OEMs who I should be supporting, before I support, somebody cross-border or an international sort of big brand? I think the other big change I see is it's quite simple. I think because in South Africa, we support a local market and we're not entirely focused on export. And that might just be because of the previous comments we were making on, those limitations, those mental blocks that we've created ourselves. Here, they don't have those mental blocks. So their big driver is, how do I export Vietnamese innovation into other countries? How do I get Vietnamese innovation, or how do I get more Kenyan innovation or Nigerian innovation, or along the same lines? And how do we as a community of security professionals actually propel each other into this global market where we move from this mindset of scarcity into this mindset of abundance? And I think that's when you see companies potentially putting what we in South Africa would think our competitors' posts, liking them, forwarding them, getting them the visibility and the audience that they need to build the brands at a global scale. So when you have global companies who cross that chasm and start doing business globally, do they take their fellow South African companies and start liking their posts, pushing their brands into into this new audience and into this new arena where we move as a community? I think it's a great privilege to represent our cybersecurity community. And make no mistake, I feel I am a product of that community. Everything I've learned from the people around me in South Africa, and I've been blessed in that way. And I think part of my, part of the liability on me now is, how do I actually propel others? How do I, that's why we work with you specifically on the hackathon. Is how do I impart the knowledge that was imparted onto me, onto other young professionals? But now as a business CEO, how do I beyond take Snode into these different markets? How do I, partner locally? How do I take other South African innovations and South African innovators so that they don't have to pay the school fees we paid? How do I, how do they leverage our position, and how do we lean on each other? And I think when you think about the turbulent times ahead for South Africa, and the turbulent times that we're experiencing right now, these are the lifelines, and this is the value that I think is needed. So also, I think it's an important time for the right kind of message like this to go out to our community.
So maybe if we look at the hackathon, and thank you again for your support of the hackathon with us.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you to ITWeb as well for supporting it.
Well, I mean, I think the key part there is obviously we're kind of looking at giving people opportunities and kind of skills development, as you kind of alluded to. I mean, looking at those different markets, do you feel that you're kind of getting a better sense? We often kind of cover it here locally about our own lack of skills and kind of skills development in cyber. I mean, in IT in general, but cyber is obviously particularly kind of important. Is that something that you're seeing internationally as well in the other markets you're in? Is there a kind of a lack of skills there, or are we kind of at the same level as everyone else? Everyone's kind of looking to develop and kind of bring people up.
So 100%, I do, in my experience, South Africa is experiencing a bit of a brain drain right now. I think the world sorely needs cybersecurity skills, and I think some of these young professionals are very attractive to a global market. I mean, as South Africans, our quality of education is extremely high. Quality tertiary institutions is very high. So the quality of graduate or information security professional you're getting from South Africa is considered to be of a very high standard. If you look at any of the security conferences, it's not unusual to find a lot of South Africans presenting all over the world. So I think in terms of thought leadership, South Africans are up there. I think when you take our current situation in SA, with the turbulence that I mentioned before, I think a lot of these young professionals are deciding to work abroad. Which is sad, because it does leave a bit of a void. And I think, me personally, I can see the void in South Africa. I can see the clients struggling for skills. I can see my peers running security consulting firms and other various different types of technology companies, all experiencing the same. There is definitely a brain drain going on that we'd love to address. I think the only real way to address not only the brain drain but some of the issues we experience in South Africa is through innovation, entrepreneurship, to give them a more attractive offer to stay local and to live and work here.
Yeah.
I think globally the situation differs from country to country. There's definitely a shortage of skills across the globe, but you see countries like Vietnam, where I am now, they have award-winning cybersecurity teams. But like 5 years ago when we got here, it was very much an open market. So I think to a large extent, a lot of the emerging and developing economies around the world are seeing cybersecurity as an opportunity to potentially leapfrog and put themselves in that, the lead position for thought leadership, for product, for services, and then to export, that intellectual capital across the world and put themselves on the map for robotics, for IoT, for cybersecurity, and other, fourth industrial revolution kind of concepts and ideas. And, Vietnam has done that very well. When you look at countries like Philippines, for example, Philippines struggle with the same sort of situation that we struggle with in South Africa. So I was essentially speaking to one of the lead agencies for cyber intelligence in the Philippines just a week ago. And he was telling us that 2/3 of all their CISP qualified people are abroad and work abroad. And I think, we're gonna, that situation is in South Africa is only going to worsen if we can't find the right reasons to attract and keep our talented South Africans at home.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, let's change it up a bit. So I grew up as a kid. I used to watch James Bond films. I've enjoyed some of the Jason Bourne series of movies. And that kind of world of international espionage, like, it often seemed quite fictional, Like it looked real. It was set in a real world, but it was far away, and there was glamorous people and cars and lifestyles and stuff. It almost seemed a bit kind of fantastical. But the more I read around cyber, the greater the role of kind of nation states seems to kind of be involved. I've just finished a podcast, and I'd recommend, if you haven't listened already, called The Lazarus Heist. And that focuses on the Lazarus gang in North Korea. Yeah. And then, they're obviously or not obviously, but they're backing the potentially the nuclear ambitions of that state. We've seen allegations about the AU's headquarters being kind of bugged by a Chinese telco. We've seen backdoors and other things put in place by American kind of agencies. It seems like wherever you look, there's an East versus West and us versus them. We've obviously, as we've or you alluded to earlier, we've got the Ukraine-Russia issue, and wherever South Africa sits on that, I'm sure we'll find out in the next few days. But we seem to kind of focus on these kind of East versus West, but I think there's a lot going on there in terms of perhaps national state or nation states with their own interests. There's kind of a lot of evolution, as far as I can tell, in cyber diplomacy, in sovereign security, and the cyber landscape seems to be like this new battlefront. It's an area that I think you've kind of looked at a bit more than I have, obviously. Give me your kind of insights. What are you seeing there? What's your take on how this whole situation is playing out?
So cyber espionage is a big concern for many countries, not just the countries involved with Russia, Ukraine, or China, Taiwan. It's becoming more and more of an issue in Vietnam because of the Chinese-Taiwan conflict. There's a lot of concern, especially around naval capabilities. If you think about where all your major cybersecurity platforms come from, it either comes from the US, it comes from Israel, it comes from China, it comes from Russia. So it's very hard as a neutral to understand where do you sit within this environment. There's more and more concerns growing around, whether, the power of the Five Eyes, and there's more and more concern growing around China and, applications like TikTok. And then in the Middle East, you've got, the case with dark matter and the eavesdropping on instant messaging communications and the scandal that erupted there. But you don't have to go far. You can look at South Africa, and you can look at the recent incident where the leaks from the NSO group, who are the creators of the spyware Pegasus, show our own president was potentially a victim of the spyware. So cyber espionage is very big, but it's been around for forever. I think we're starting to ask these deep questions around our supply chain, which we didn't ask before. Like, where are we getting our security technologies from? Another big question that clients are starting to ask is around technologies like SSL interception. Does it make sense to give up our secrets in the name of security? This is one of the areas which, I'm a big protagonist for privacy preserving technology. As a matter of fact, Snode's patent for our technology is all around being able to detect attacks in ciphered communications, where our clients don't have to hand over the encryption keys, so we don't have to have access to their secrets in order to protect them. And interestingly enough, we're one of the very few technologies in the world that actually do this. I think technically a lot of people would understand this because they're used to technologies, performing things like SSL interception or, pretty much becoming a man in the middle in order to protect encrypted communications and traffic, because, we know no other better way. That has been the standard way to do that. But if you look at the vulnerabilities embedded within the security technologies that we trust with these certificates, that also introduces an entirely new facet of concern or risk that needs to be managed. Am I going to trust all my secrets to this technology? And, what's the security posture of that technology itself to hold all my secrets? So with that in the backdrop or in the back of my mind, I think the future of Snode is really to provide privacy preserving technology where we're doing threat detection and vulnerability detection within ciphered streams without you having to give us your encryption keys or letting go of your secrets. This has been widely adopted. It's why we have so much success with intelligence agencies, critical national infrastructure, and now we have a lot of banks starting to adopt the technology, across border. A lot of these institutions, power grids, ports, are starting to worry about where they get their defense technologies from, and in the event of some form of conflict, where would they stand and how secure, would the infrastructure and the security posture be if they didn't have local capability?
So something that you said there that made me kind of think a bit more broadly. As a South African founded company, and as a kind of African nation, we kind of sit in between the East and West, and you kind of mentioned the bigger players, and we kind of buy solutions from them generally. Are you hoping that as this kind of coming from somewhere in the middle, we're going to have more trust internationally because of that? And to throw a cat amongst the pigeons, what do you think of like the seeming alliance with Russia, and how do you think that kind of affects the outlook for Snode? Is it kind of, are you going to be seen more internationally as, hey, you're from South Africa, therefore you're leaning more this way? What's your kind of take on those subjects?
So we were adopted by many countries for, I think there's three big reasons at the forefront of why so many countries are adopting Snode for sovereign security. I think number one is we're privately owned. Okay. I'm not sure if you know this, but a lot of security companies are backed or funded by intelligence institutions like the CIA or Mossad, which is the intelligence division of the Israeli Defense Force, or MI6 or the likes, right? And we're one of the very few privately owned institutions that work in this space, not just within the threat detection space, but we do work protecting elections, protecting critical national infrastructure, predictive policing, and a host of other applications which are cyber related, but fall within the traditional realm of defense. So the second reason is because South Africa for a long time was seen as a neutral place to source your technology from. That, of course, has changed, but it wasn't just the Russian warship that landed on our shores that changed that. It was when we started doing the naval exercises with China and Russia. Yeah, I can say this to you now because it's not under any sort of secrecy or contract, but we were kicked out of a major defense contract when we started that particular exercise, and they made it quite clear to us that it was because of South Africa's position on those exercises. So I do think, if you're asking me, does it affect our business? I think, in all honesty, it really does. That contract was, Canadian, and it was a 5-year contract for us, and it was, our partners were in Canada and the US and all over the world, and it would have been great for a South African company to have been in the mix of a contract like that. So it does hurt business. I don't criticize sure. Without a clear understanding. I don't think that's my place. I don't think I have enough insight to understand why and how we do it. But if the question is, has that impacted our business? Yes. I do think, before I'm a businessman, I'm a South African. I think if if the decisions we make are the right decisions for our country and position us in, for the greater good of every South African, I'm quite happy to not make too much of a fuss. But I do, it does open the question: how does that hurt my peers, my fellow members of the community? How does that hurt all our endeavors to take South African businesses across the globe? And I think it would be wrong for me to stand on the, on a forum, in a forum like this, and not to say that it does hurt. It does hurt our business. It's directly impacted our bottom line. The third reason why people are taking the technology from South Africa is because South Africans are outperforming a lot of, are doing a great job cross-border. I think you have South Africans working in these countries. I think they do a great job of raising the flag. I think you've got South African businesses, like Orange, I know is now part of Orange Telco, but Senspos, Telspace, the list goes on, right? I could give you a huge list of South African companies who represent us as a community across the globe. And I think that's made our lives so much easier to walk into a boardroom and say we're from South Africa, and everybody, you're welcomed as a thought leader because of so many of the thought leaders that preceded myself and Snode Technologies. And, let me take the opportunity to thank members of the community and my peers in this industry for flying the South African flag. And I think that's a very, very positive thing that I have experienced, going, taking my business overseas.
Nithen, I'm going to ask you one last question, and it's my go-to last question because it kind of covers all bases for when I forget to do stuff, which happens a lot. Is there anything that we haven't discussed? Anything that you want to kind of add? Any closing thoughts that you would like to put out there for the world to consume?
No, look, I'm gonna be missing the event. So to all my friends, all my peers, even the people who think they're my, who feel we're competitors back at home in South Africa, know that I miss you guys, and that I wish I could be there. To the kids at the hackathon, I'm so sorry I can't be with you guys. That's probably, the saddest part of doing this interview virtually. To the CEO of ITWeb, the guys at Geek Culture, the team at ITWeb supporting the hackathon and the conference. Good luck. Thank you for everything you've put in, all the hard work, all the hours. I'm going to miss you guys too. And to my team who will be supporting Snode. I miss you guys a lot, and I hope to see you guys soon, all of you. And thank you for this opportunity, and I hope you guys enjoy the conference. And if y'all have drinks, have a beer, have one beer, and think of me.
Cool. I was getting quite emotional there, Nithen. Okay, well, that's been great. That's been fantastic, Nithen. It's been great to speak to you today, and hearing your thoughts on Snode, on cyber sovereign security. It's a fascinating area. Nithen Naidoo, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Cheers. Bye-bye.